And we're back. You are listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Radio Network. Welcome back. Folks, before we kick off our next section here, talking to Brandon Allen, the founder of New Work Revolution, I want to remind you that you can go to exitology.com. You can click on Contact Us, send us any question under the sun, business related, hopefully, and we will answer it on an upcoming episode. And so with that, Brandon, welcome back to the show.
All right, it's good to be back.
So a few minutes ago, we were talking about really some leadership items as far as, how do you understand your game and playing your game, and how does that filter down to seeing performance in the team? But really, the glue that holds all this together is what? It's relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we build? Let me try to set the stream out here. A lot of times we have these companies that we work with, and they might be engineer led, or there's a lot of sort of introvert, really high IQ types that maybe aren't so good at building relationships because they're more technical minded or engineer minded or something like that. So how do we build stronger relationships, even if it feels uncomfortable? Because if that's the glue that holds our success together, right? That's the thing that changes. If I'm in a pinch, I can pick up the phone and it's a who, not how situation, right? Like you can collapse timeframes and create amazing things if you have good relationships. But just talk us through the importance of relationships, and how do you build relationships, and how do you use them to everybody's benefit?
The most important thing to building great relationships is to be the kind of person that people want to be in relationship with. So it's not about tricks, tools, all these other things that people will get stuck on in building relationships and really connecting with other people. The first thing is really asking yourself, am I someone that other people would want to be around? Am I someone who other people would want to collaborate with? Am I the kind of leader that someone would want to work for? Am I the kind of coach, accountant, attorney that other people will want to work with? This is the thing that we have to consider in relationships and building relationships. So the first thing that I do when I'm looking at this is look at your own crap. What is it that you bring to the table that repels relationships? And I'll use a personal example with this.
Ooh.
I actually find myself to be a very connection-minded person. In fact, I have friends from elementary school on up. I have people that I've been in relationship with and have been friends with for a long time. But there's always been something about how I do relationships that's bordered on an error of safety. So for me, if anyone's familiar with the enneagram is it's a personality type assessment that really draws out kind of what your strongest attribute is, while also discovering and helping you illuminate what your greatest fear is. So I happen to be an 8 in the enneagram, which is called the challenger. And the challenger's greatest fear is people getting one over on them. Oh. Now, when I think about that, it makes total sense. I grew up in a home that was not so safe for many years for a variety of reasons that I won't get into here.
Yeah.
And it gave me a general distrust of people, but it really gave me a distrust of authority. So I really struggled with that in school. I struggled with that in a corporate job. I really had a hard time building relationships. I would let people get close, but not too close.
Okay.
I would let people in kind of the breezeway, but they're not getting in the house. So I had a general sense of holding people away from me. In leadership, that did not serve me very well. It created a disconnect between me and other people. One of the pieces of advice that I got in my very first leadership assignment from someone who was a lot higher up in the company than I was, he said, Brandon, let me give you a piece of relationship advice. He said, don't be friends with your people. He's like, you got to hold them out here. Don't let them get too close. What he didn't realize is that was something that came very natural to me. And I was like, well, if this is what it takes to lead well, I'm going to do a great job with this because I don't let people in anyway. I practiced this. I had a ruthless commitment to this practice. It
Hmm.
was disastrous.
Really?
In leadership, you've got to give people a little bit of who you are so that they have connection. It's like when you speak to an audience,
Hmm.
you give people what we call bus stops. All right. How do we get people on the bus? Oh, you like baseball? I like baseball too. Oh, you like cooking on a smoker? Oh, I love cooking on a smoker too. Hey, you've lived in Seattle before? Oh, I've lived in Seattle before. Whatever the things that we can create some common ground with, we've got to do that. And
Yeah.
in my own interpersonal efforts with people, I fell short in that area. And I think about this in the same way that I think about parenting kids. I have 4 daughters,
Hmm.
and I would never tell them, well, I'm your dad, I'm not your friend. What I would say, though, is that I am an authority in your life, and there are boundaries and agreements that come along with me being authority, but it doesn't
Mm.
mean I don't care about you. So I think sometimes we mistake being an authority figure with being an uncaring person, and it creates a disconnect with the people that we lead. And so
Yeah.
that's my story, though. My story was that I had a hard time going all the way with someone in terms of really building and playing full out in a relationship because I was
Hmm.
worried that they would let me down and take advantage of me. Instead of playing to win, I played not to lose in relationships, and it cost me early on in my career. So,
You, I love that you shared all this, though.
yeah, so
This
we
is
all
so
have
good.
that
Yeah.
thing that we need to work through.
Yep.
My story is going to be different from yours, but we all have that thing to work through, and it starts with us.
Well, you shared so many important things there, and I first of all have to, acknowledge and thank you for sharing your own story to bring people into that because I think we've all certainly experienced a version of that, right? It's a tricky situation. How far do you let these people in, your team members, your clients, the people you're working with, right? And there's certainly a case to be made, and I think you're making it very well, which is they need to be let in far enough so that they have a true heart-centered connection with you. And, especially in these blue collar businesses and these industrial environments and stuff like this is not the normal. This is why we have this show, is because this is not necessarily a welcome discussion on day one.
Right.
Right. It's we'll talk about anything when it comes to, running this business, except for the really juicy stuff, which is how do we make the people succeed in this environment, right?
Yep.
And so I really want people to drill into the importance of what we're speaking about here. And it's okay to be a human in business is one of the ways that I would sort of bucket this. Also, I thought was interesting. I thought you were going to share something about, essentially, remember the golden rule, right? Put differently, if you want to have friends, be a good friend, right? If you want to
Yeah.
have people follow you, be a good leader, be a human being. But instead, what you said was look at your own crap.
Yeah.
And I actually I love that because it where might I be blocking that connection, right? Where might I not be playing full out? And so what maybe with all of your experience working with different business owners and all of this, what are some, maybe walk us through a scenario where somebody wasn't initially playing full out, hopefully they had an awareness breakthrough and then they started to play full out. Like how does that look in the world?
Oh man. I mean, there's so many areas in that regard. So I'll give you one. I had a dental client that I worked
Mhm.
with who was in a partnership. And he got on the phone with me and he said, Brandon, I hate my partner, I hate my team, and I hate dentistry. What should I do?
Oh,
And
that's
so
rough.
we had a really honest conversation about this. And the first thing we addressed was the partner. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, look, if the parents, quote unquote, aren't getting along here, then the rest of the thing's going to fall apart. And I
Right.
said, hey, when when was the last time you talked to your partner about your concerns? And he got super quiet and he said, I never have. So it's so interesting how we play it safe. and we don't reach out and vulnerably talk about the issues and the challenges that we're having because we're worried about how other people will receive it, we'll
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're weak for saying, hey, I need more help than you're giving me.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what's funny about this. When he confronted his partner about it, and I told him, do this in a loving way because he is not aware of the problem. I guarantee you this. It is not malicious. So err on the side of this is an honest situation that has come by honestly. And he reaches out to him. They have this conversation. And his partner said, I never knew you felt that way. I thought you did all these things because you wanted to.
Oh man. Oh man.
Building a bridge. And he got back on the phone with me and he's like, I felt like such an idiot when he said that because I realized I was not stating my needs
Mm-hmm.
clearly with my own partner. And I see this in partnerships all the time. I
Yeah.
come in actually at times. One of the things that people have me do is they'll come out and have me work with partners to get them back together. How do we work this out? Because they're so disillusioned and disenfranchised by the partnership, they
Yeah.
feel like the only way to move forward is to dissolve the partnership and go their separate ways. When in fact, there's just some fundamental things that they're not expressing and talking about that if they
Mm-hmm.
did would completely transform their relationship for the better. And so that's just one example of many that I could give you in that regard.
Well, thank you for sharing that example because we see that a lot with these privately held businesses, right? And a lot of times
Yeah.
it looks like this. I'm 80 years old. I built a pretty good business. The exit snuck up on me, and I've got to figure out what to do. And the fact of the matter is, you don't have enough time to maximize the value of that business, right?
Yeah.
Then it gets even more interesting because a lot of times the partnership in which we're talking about is a 50-year-old marriage. And almost always it comes down to a situation like what you just said there where it's as simple as whoops, 30 years ago you probably should have had X, Y, and Z conversation. And then there's all this extra, built up animosity and stuff like that. And the business situation of this massive change is the catalyst to bring all this stuff forth. But it's an important discussion is my point, no matter what stage of the game you're in. So don't be afraid to have the difficult conversation. Check out Brandon's website, newworkrevolution.com, and we are going to take another short 2-minute break. Brandon, that was an awesome segment. Thank you for sharing all that with us. In a couple minutes, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about a whole nother level of the onion as we unpeel this one layer at a time. So we'll be right back with you. You're listening to Xology on International Business Growth Radio Network.